the best analogy I can give you is you don't get a roadmap in life. You don't get a roadmap in business. You get dropped into a coal mine and you're given this little headlamp, right, that only shows you the next 3 to 4 steps. And the only way to see the next step or to see around the next corner is to take one.
Welcome to the No One Ever Told Me podcast, where we talk about the things that no one ever tells you that you really need to know to be successful and to thrive in business and in leadership. Today, my guest is Nathan Artt, principal and founder of Ministry Solutions, Executive Leadership Solutions, and XP Solutions. And on this episode, Nathan talks through the ins and outs of leading a fast-growing company, the upside of COVID disruption, and why you should hire and empower a team of experts to build the best version of your organization. Nathan, you drove up from Atlanta just to have this conversation. Thanks for coming to the show.
Well, thank you, Matt. I'm excited to be here. We've been talking about doing this for a while, so it's great to be here.
So you've got a crazy story, and I definitely want to go into your background because it's awesome. But right now, when you tell people what you do professionally, how do you answer that question?
We help leaders get from where they are to where they feel called to be, and we do that in 3 different ways.
Okay. What are those 3 ways?
So the first is my background is in real estate. So I tell people, Matt, I accidentally started a company 8 years ago.
That's right.
Serving churches. Basically, I became a Christian, and my church called one day and said, "Hey, you have a background in real estate. You know, we have all these churches around the country that are making real estate finance decisions. Would you mind just taking a look under the hood and seeing how they're doing?" That's
good.
You know, and 8 years later, here we are.
Yep.
Helping churches with multi-site strategy and building acquisitions and upfits and these things. But through that story, man, we had a chance also just to connect with some of the best guys we knew from a second chair leadership perspective. You were part of that group, right? And someone came to us one day with the idea of like, hey, how do we equip second chair leaders within the context of community? And so that started out as one event that has now become a company, right?
Yep.
Executive Leadership Solutions. And then the third opportunity is, a lot of small and up-and-coming churches struggle to find the expertise and the talent of top executives in our space. And so, again, guys like yourself and others that we've worked with, how do we take the knowledge and experience they have and let other churches who are growing kind of borrow that experience for a season? And so those are the 3 ways that we help leadership teams.
I love that. So if someone's in a marketplace and may not understand some of the background behind churches, so a second chair leader, would you describe that as maybe like your CFO or your COO to maybe a lead pastor as your CEO? How do you guys think about that?
I would see that person as a chief operating officer type of role. I mean, basically you have your visionary who's out there making it rain. Actually setting things on fire.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you have your operator who is the actual firefighter putting a majority of those fires out.
That's really good. So let's go back to, so you're a heck of a basketball player.
Oh boy.
But that got you into a Division I college, right? So let's talk about a little bit of childhood that gave you the inputs that led to some of the outputs that you have now.
Well, it's just an interesting question, man. So yeah, I had so much of that time in my life does form where I'm at for several different reasons, right? So so my very quick story is I just grew up in a challenging environment. And but basketball was an outlet for me, and had a chance to play on Team Nike for a couple years. We had 15 guys on the team. Every single guy on the team played D1. 8 of them played pro. Actually signed at an Ivy League school in the Northeast, and then had to come back home to play D1 just because of some family dynamics and things. The fun part of the story is this: I did lose basketball. I actually lost a lot during that season. And I was the guy who swore I will never step foot inside of a church.
Yeah.
I mean, I was angry. I got in a lot of trouble. I was kind of that smart kid that you're the smart guy who makes really dumb decisions. Like that kind of defined my late teens and early 20s. And then what's just interesting is, even my pathway to the Lord was just a guy investing in me, a mentor who just, God put something on his heart, man, but he just poured into me, bought me a DVD series from Andy Stanley.
Okay.
I'm like, I'm not going to church, but I will watch this dude if it makes sense. And so I watched Andy a little bit and I was like, wow, he does not seem awful. He actually seems kind of practical. Like I could listen to, even though he's a Christian, I could actually listen to this guy. And then I got so curious that ended up at a community group just because, again, I didn't want to go to church.
Right.
but ended up at a community group because that was a safe place for me to go. But my crazy part about my story and where you even see church today is that I became a Christian before I ever stepped foot inside of a church because of kind of a digital ministry impact.
Yeah, that's
right?
cool. I love that.
Yeah.
So 8 years ago, Ministry Solutions was founded, and it was basically out of an opportunity to serve as a volunteer, right?
Pretty much.
Okay. Well, so let's back up a couple years before that, because you had to develop a competency to even start a business like that.
Yeah.
So I think we talk a lot about risk and competency, and I think competency is a way to keep risk at bay. To get good at what you do, there's always inherent risk, right? But,
yep.
So your mentor is also a real estate developer. Is that correct?
He was one of the founders of Century 21 Real Estate. And he's bought and owned tons of commercial properties. And he's the one who introduced me to the world of real estate.
But you have a specific window into that. It's more from a financial analysis, financial background into real estate. So talk about that, because that's a unique skill set.
Yeah. So when I was a sophomore in college and, coming out of affordable housing.
Wait, how many kids on the basketball team had your major?
0.
That's what I thought. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, 0. I did some tutoring back then too, but so it was just interesting. I come from affordable housing. My mom left beginning of my senior year of high school. My dad made it through almost the end of my high school, but I've truly, neither one of my parents are in my life. I mean, I've truly been on my own since I was 17 years old. So when you come out of a background where you kind of see a lot of negatives and you experience poverty and just all that comes with it, like you don't have this goal of being a multimillionaire. Like you just have this goal of getting out.
Right.
And so it's funny. I was 19. I know that basketball has a runway, right? That it's about to end. And so somebody invited me to go to this presentation from a company called Countrywide, which obviously went out of business. Yeah. But it was
the
interesting.
Mortgage company, right?
The mortgage company. Yeah, man. And so I tell people, man, I learned 2 things that day. Okay. One, there's a letter T in the word mortgage, very important. But the other is that there was a comma in every paycheck, right? And I didn't need to know anything else. I'm like, sign me up, I'm in, right? Literally within like 6 months, top 20 loan officer in the company. Just kind of get promoted through the ladder, meet my mentor, got very bored with residential lending. Ended up, there was a very fledgling commercial financial company that had an opportunity. I'm like, well, I figured the other thing out. I'll figure this out too. Yeah. So went into commercial lending, was successful there, got promoted. The guy that was over me left. And now all of a sudden, I'm not just doing commercial deals. I'm running a commercial lending outfit at 24 years old.
Wow.
And then the last move was my mentor called me and said, look, you're young and you're doing things, but let's just say, if I may have mentioned, my early 20s were not, the most personal, personally were not, anything to glorify. He just said, look, I just think you really need some community, and I think you need me as a mentor. And so he got me a position kind of overseeing some private equity and some other, it was all real estate related. The whole idea was, so I had really rich people basically come to me and say, how do we evaluate building opportunities as investments? And my job was to go in and figure out how to monetize real estate assets in a way that they manage risk and had, the highest level of upside.
Okay. So there's like almost a portfolio aspect to that investment. And you wrote them a formula that said, if you invest X, here's your risk and here's the potential return. And you figured that out as a mid-20s.
Yes.
Something. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So you're a whiz kid. Were you bad in high school with academics, or are you okay?
No, I was straight A's. I was actually like this. It was I'm kind of a dichotomy, man. I was obviously, I told you I grew up, a certain way and acted a certain way, but like secretly in the closet, like I loved to read. I was a math geek. Like I actually went to a couple science fairs and won math competitions, but I didn't let anybody know that because they would have beat me up.
Our first point of contact was probably 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And, it was a phone call. I didn't know what you looked like. I didn't look you up on LinkedIn. And I kind of thought like pocket protector, pencils, and glasses. I never would have thought Division I basketball star on the other side of the phone. So it was a surprise to meet you in person that you weren't this math nerd, externally, just internally.
Just internally.
That's right.
That's right.
So we love to talk about failures on this show because I think there's so many times that they teach us more about ourselves and about our leadership than our successes do. So maybe as you worked for other organizations and then as you started your own company, what are the things that you're like, I really screwed that up, but it led me to a different outcome or a different resolution or a different solution?
Oh my gosh. I mean, not to oversimplify, but, I have a 6-year-old son who gets very frustrated himself easily. And I mean, that's the one thing I want to instill in him is I asked him, I said, what's the difference between failure and growth? And he says, perspective.
Your 6-year-old.
My 6-year-old.
I want to party with him.
Well, I mean, I taught it to him because it's something I want him to know at an early age that I think, man, at the end of the day for me, I think you borrow this from sports because no matter how much you get down or no matter how many shots you miss, the objective is always to win the game.
Yeah.
Right? And so things are never as good as they seem. They're never as bad as they seem because the game hasn't ended, right?
Still going.
The clock's still going. And as long as the clock is still going, it doesn't matter how bad things have gone or how good things have gone. You haven't accomplished your mission. And so a failure is just it's a deterrent. But for a lot of people, that becomes a place we stop because we let it define us. And I think that's been one thing that you just learn in sports is that you just get back up, right? But as far as failures, man, I think my thing I have failed at probably the most is not taking risks that I felt would have been the best decisions because I was afraid.
Playing it safe.
I'm playing it safe.
When you think about what safety looks like, how much is people's perspective or opinion of you weigh into that? And how much is more of just like a P&L, like safety factor?
It's easy to blame. It's always easy to blame the P&L. I think that's symptomatic, right? Like we're in the P&L situation we're in because of decisions that we've made of things that we didn't correct or that we weren't on top of. But at the end of the day, I'm gauging whether or not I want to take a bet on myself.
Yeah.
Right? And with that, every insecurity you could imagine pops up. And really that's the thing, if I had to talk to anyone that was thinking about, starting a business, if, there's anybody out there that's like, man, I'm in this position and I want to do something different and God's put something on my heart and I really think that this is what I'm supposed to do and they feel held back. Here's what I would say, man, is I feel like don't make passive mistakes.
I love that word, passive mistake.
If you're going to make a mistake betting on yourself. Because the biggest mistake you'll make is looking back and wishing that you would have taken a risk on yourself.
We could probably hit stop right now. I think that's what someone would need to hear on this podcast. That's so good, Nathan. Where'd you pick that up? How has that seeped into your bones? Because I can tell that's real for you.
Yeah, I think not everyone on the podcast is a Christian, but I am, as I've said. And, for me, I think the hardest thing that I've had to deal with is imposter syndrome. So again, like we talked a little bit about my past, but like, man, you're this kid, you grow up in affordable housing, your mom and your dad leaves you and you're told every day, that you're an F up or that there's something wrong with you.
Worthless,
Yeah, you're worthless. I mean, you hear all these awful things from the people that are supposed to love and care for you. And so, you struggle with identity.
Yeah.
Because something inside of you doesn't reconcile with what you've been told about yourself. But you struggle with it because those are the people that you're supposed to trust the most with that. But I will tell you that, like, for me, the thing God has worked on more than anything is I am not who I say I am.
Oh, yeah.
I am who he says I am. Dude. And he has been working on that through me. And so for me, one of the things I learned is this. We think that insecurity is a form of humility because we think less of ourselves. Really, insecurity is just as deceptive and evil as pride because it puts us at the center of the story.
That's right.
And both of them are a form of pride.
It's the shadow side of pride. That's right.
It is the shadow side of pride. I had to learn that like me thinking less of myself or not taking risk on myself, or the opposite idea that if I take a risk on myself, I'm arrogant. That's not it. It's getting to the point where I can feel like I belong. That's been the hardest lesson for me to learn. I belong.
Yeah.
So that's been the thing that it is a passion subject of mine, and that's
I can tell.
Yeah, it's something I want to tell everybody.
This is not a parenting podcast, but that's impossible with your background for that not to seep into the way you're going to parent your kids. You've got a son and you got a daughter.
Yep.
We'll get back into the business of what
we're
we're talking about soon, but this
tangent
tangent's so helpful for me to even to listen to. What are the things, you talk about the perspective you want your son to have in his relationship with failure. Mm-hmm. What else are you teaching them that's a direct result of your upbringing?
Oh my gosh. We may need another session. I think about it all the time, man. And thank God for counselors and Christian friends and mentors. But Yeah. One of them is, man, I try to create memorable statements so that things that I want him to know are things that come out of. So I'll say an example. I'll say Canaan or Evie, either one of them. I'm like, Daddy is so proud of you. What does proud mean? And they will say, you're so happy on your son, or you're so happy on your daughter. I'm like, that's right. And that's all it is. And it's not what you, and they finish the statement by saying, do no matter what I say, no matter how I act, no matter what. And so it's just that constant reminder, like I'm setting that foundation now.
You got values for your kids.
Yeah.
Like sticky statements on a corporate wall, but they're their little hearts.
They're my little hearts. I say them every day.
Wow.
It's part of my bedtime routine. They're already getting, they love it, but there's about 5 to 10 of those. So anytime I come across something I want to impart to my kids, it's not necessarily repetition on my part. It's like I try to figure out a way to bring them into the statement with me so that they remember it.
That's so good. I love that. Okay. Let's go back a little bit to the story. So I know a lot of leaders that would love to be mentored, but for some reason, whether it's time or opportunity or, you fill in the blank, it doesn't manifest. So what about your mentor and your mentor relationship? What did he see in you that solidified his commitment to want to develop you?
Well, I'll say this. So in my current life now, I have a lot of mentors.
That's great.
And I want to talk about that because that is a question I hear a lot. It takes a village to raise a Nathan. And so thankfully God has sent a village. But yeah, the first one, I don't know how to explain it other than like, I feel like the Lord just way before I wanted anything to do with him, just reached out and was like, hey, at some point, I'm calling you back. And he sent this wonderful, very patient man into my life who just loved on me. Never proselytized, never tried to sell me on Christianity, lived out his faith, talked to his secretary the way he did the chairman of the board. He modeled it. He loved me. The year I became a Christian, he decided he was going to wake up every three days a week early in the morning and just spend some time with me. And he wanted to do a devotional. I didn't want to do a devotional, but I would because he wanted me to. But where I am today, here's the advice I would give on the mentorship, because I feel like this is a question I get asked more than any other question. Wow. I have Don, and then I have 3 or 4 other men who are at the top of their game in business, in life. They have great marriages. They're good people. How in the world does that happen? Well, you pray for it. And I know that sounds like a very thing to say, but the reality is you say, Lord, I don't have that father figure. I have you, but I want you, please put those people into my life. And I literally I just continue to ask him for that. But here's the other thing. I would say that no one has ever gone into a business presentation that did not make money. Have you ever seen a business presentation that did not make money?
Maybe. Shark Tank? I don't know.
Well, that's true. That's true. But most of them do. But when people when they limp into the mentorship conversation, they're trying to ask somebody to mentor them. They kind of lead with all the reasons why, I know you're busy and you wouldn't want to do this or whatever. What I found is guys that are at the pinnacle of their careers, their objectives have moved from success to significance.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that for a second.
Well, they've done success, right? Yeah. They've built a company. They probably have kids that have moved out of the house. The things that they set out, they probably accomplished more than what they set out to do.
Sure.
So now that's behind them. And there's no amount of money that fills the void. So what happens is now they're thinking of their life in a different way. And it's, how can I take what's happened to me and create as many of those experiences for other people as possible? There's a ton of people who think like that. The problem is nobody truly ever comes to them and says, hey, here's if you spend time with me, here's the things I'm struggling with. Yeah. I feel like if you could help me in these areas, here's what I could accomplish. But we don't actually lay out the value that the mentorship brings. And so you're talking to people who their most valuable commodity is not their money, it's their time and their experience.
100%.
They will absolutely invest that if they know that it's going to get a return. But on the other end of that, we're so scared of having that conversation. We're so scared of asking. Right. I'm just not. I just feel confident hey, I'm and you've met another one of them, right? One of the biggest private developers in Atlanta. And yeah, I just sat down with them and I said, hey, Mr. Voiles, here's the things I'm trying to accomplish. I feel like the Lord's really called me to this. I don't know what I'm doing. Would you be willing to help? Because I think if you would help me, here's some of the things that we'd be able to do. And 5 years later, he's still my mentor.
That's unbelievable. That's so great, Nathan. So one thing I talk about on the show a lot is that there are just some things that no one can ever tell you that you just have to go tackle in leadership and in business, right?
Yeah.
Mentors may not even give you the blinker because some challenges you just have to step up to and take a swing on your own. So maybe leaving the corporate world and stepping into your own company, what were the things that no one ever told you, even your mentors that didn't get you the hat tip that, hey, look out for this? What were the hard-earned lessons that you just had to figure out for yourself?
I mentioned one of them. I can't underestimate this though, but you belong. Yeah. I do believe that every decision we make is based on how we see ourselves. And even in the Bible, when it talks about, transforming your mind and how we take off one cloak and we put on another, all of that to me revolves around the idea of identity. We make different decisions because we see ourselves differently. When you realize that you belong and you realize that you add value, the fear goes away.
That's good.
The scare part of you goes away. But here's something I don't know that anyone ever told me that I've shared with just a few people. Everybody goes into business to be successful or to attain success.
Sure.
What I've learned is I think if you focus on how can I make the biggest impact, success will always be inevitable in that equation.
Yeah.
And then so many things that we think about why we don't start businesses, why we don't do things, it's like, well, who am I to do this or who am I to do that or how do I lead?
Right?
Yeah, what if it fails? But when the Lord puts something on your heart that's so big that it keeps you up at night, which a lot of you, like me, we think about it and it does keep us up at night. It's just that we don't want to get out of the boat.
Yeah.
We don't want to get out of the boat. And so I feel like when you focus on impact, so if you focus on identity and impact, all of those other things fall into the places that they're supposed to belong, right? Because now it's not about making money. Now it's about truly seeing a problem that you are uniquely able to solve and going after that with everything you have, getting the right people on board, you're casting vision, you're leading, you're doing all the things because the impact you're trying to make is bigger than you.
Okay, that's so good. But at some point that shifted. So one of the questions I ask a lot of leaders is, how has your definition of success changed? Because time changes our definition. Yeah. Once we get a perspective on it, you go, hey, that's not what I thought it was. It's actually this. When did that shift happen for you? What had to be true for you to come up with that definition?
Ooh, boy. Yeah, I mean, that definition has changed so many times, right? And, so I made the joke about starting off in finance. I just wanted to pay check with a comma.
I love that.
Now it's, businesses and we've been fortunate, right? And it's, well into the 7-figure side. And now it's like, success to me is like, I would love for every person on my team to make, there's a certain number of people on my team that I would love to see make a certain amount of money, right, for them because they've confided in me what their dreams and aspirations are. Everybody on my team could be working somewhere else. So now the company's doing well. We're making an impact. Am I satisfied with that? No. Do I want to make a bigger impact? Yes. But it's changed, and I think I've realized that now it's gone from me trying to do something on my own to attracting a level of people I never thought I could attract. Now it's about making them successful in what I feel their calling is.
That's so good. I love that. So I want to talk about momentum, and I feel like when leaders look back over 2020, there's a how I led pre-COVID and how I led post-COVID. So there's a question in there that I'll let you answer. But uniquely, because I know your story, I know what's going on with your company, that has led to significant momentum and opportunities that I don't know that would have happened if COVID hadn't happened.
Amen to that.
So when you think about momentum, capitalizing, stewarding, creating, what does momentum mean for you and for your company right now?
I think it means being the best possible learners that we can be. So
let's talk about learning, because that's really, really important.
Yeah. Here's one of the things I think that makes people fearful, makes me fearful, is when I go into a business or I want to risk money or if I want to invest in marketing over here or a real estate project over here, I want to see, okay, this is point A and here is point Z. By the way, I'm using my left hand and my right hand. Here's point A, here's point Z. And we want a very clear roadmap to how do we get from point A to point Z. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that is not how life works.
Doesn't work.
No. The best analogy I can give you is you don't get a roadmap in life. You don't get a roadmap in business.
Preach.
You get dropped into a coal mine and you're given this little headlamp, right, that only shows you the next 3 to 4 steps. And the only way to see the next step or to see around the next corner is to take one. That's what you get. And so when it comes to this, we get so stagnant and just so caught up in the unknown and what we don't know that we get frozen. I mean, people talk about the paralysis of analysis, but it's not just this expression. It's the lack of clarity will force us to stay in a position longer than we need to be there, and we miss our opportunities. So fire musket shots. So anybody familiar with Jim Collins has this concept where before you shoot the cannons, you shoot some musket balls to get in range and to figure out, the distance and stuff. I go back to make some aggressive mistakes that you can fail and not feel bad about.
Yep.
Here's
if you fail, it doesn't halt your momentum.
It doesn't halt your momentum, and actually the lesson you learn from the failure is more valuable than the money you spent on the failure.
That's good.
So that's huge. One other thing to realize is, do you know what it takes to become a Hall of Fame batter? A 300 batting average. Like, you literally only have to hit 1 out of 3. Yeah. And you make it into the Hall of Fame, man. Like, you're a world-class three-point shooter if you're shooting 41, 42%. That literally means that you are Steph Curry level if you make less than you miss. Right? But when we come to business, we feel like we don't get 100% right of it all the time, then we should just stop and not do anything.
That's right.
That's wrong, right? Like, that's just so wrong. It's about mitigated risks where we have an opportunity to continue to make progress. Like, people use this word pivot. I don't like it.
Same.
Yeah, right? Because the idea is I have to turn my back on one thing to focus on another. That's not what this is about. It's not pivoting. It's learning how to make lateral movements as you're heading towards the end zone to avoid getting tackled, right? So that's my thing, man. Be comfortable, be confident enough in yourself to take mitigated risks. As long as you're moving forward, it's okay.
That's right. It's left foot, right foot. You got to keep moving forward, and sometimes it's kind of wonky as you do that.
Should be.
All right, so let's go back to COVID for a second. What have you learned about yourself and your leadership in the last 12 to 14 months?
So that's a really good question, and if it's okay, I actually even back up a year because there was something that happened to me, probably more significantly, leading up to COVID. Everybody talks in leadership about you have to delegate, and as you know, I was kind of forced into a situation. So my wife at the time, we found out I had brain cancer, and that just, it just put everything on hold. And I just started, thank goodness, to really build out the team and start to trust people. Yeah. But I didn't have a choice, man. I have 2 kids and her going through surgeries and all the things that had to happen. And I couldn't be present as a business owner. And so that went on for over 2 years. And man, I learned, you could look at the situation and go, wow, here's this guy who's really great at finding great people and delegating. That wasn't the case. That's not what happened. I was a control freak who had no choice but to give up my baby and trust the people that I hired. That's good. 2 things happened. And I've thought so much about this, Matt. Like, the obvious happened. They stepped up. When I got out of the way, really amazing people were better at the things I was good at, and they took ownership in it and all the things that you would expect. Yep. I would say the unexpected thing I learned was they did the same for me. So, like, I am, if you can't tell on the podcast, I'm an Enneagram 8. I have a I have a very high 2, and one of the things I personally love is I love investing in people. I love, if anyone invites me to be along with them on the journey, and like, man, I love that because people did that for me, and I've seen what it's done in my life. So I love investing in people. And so when I got out of the weeds, it also gave me a chance to kind of learn more about what my team needed and my family needed and everyone needed from me. And I actually now find myself doing the things that I'm best designed for. It wasn't just me getting out of their way. I actually freed myself up to put myself in the position that is best suited for me.
I love that. Your circle's changed a little bit these last couple of years. I mean, you're partying with like Frank Blake and stuff like that these days. So what are you learning from leaders who have been further than you have in your leadership? What are those guys teaching you?
Yeah, especially.
And you don't have to name drop. I just dropped.
No. There's a few guys, and as we started, executive leadership summit, it turns out there's some really amazing Christian CEOs that love the idea of speaking into the church. And so for whatever reason, here comes this kid from the wrong side of the tracks, and now he's in the room with, Fortune 500 CEOs. That story has nothing to do with me. Yeah. So obviously, Matt, you would do the same. You get that opportunity. Yeah. You learn, you just put yourself at their feet.
Sponge.
And, man. Right. Yeah. They just think differently.
Okay.
Fear's not on their radar. You know what?
Say that a little louder for the people in the back.
Fear is not on their radar. So you did mention one name. Yeah. So Frank Blake was the CEO of Home Depot. He's now the chairman at Macy's and Procter & Gamble and Delta. We were so he's spending some time with me as we're launching these companies just because he loves the church and wants to see it flourish. And we were walking through some scenarios, and I just made a comment. And I was like, but I just never see that happening. We were talking about a possible scenario. He's like, I don't know. Why? And I'm like, well, you know what? That's a great question. Why not? And that's the first thing that comes to their mind is, they have such an abundance mentality. They're actually usually very good friends with people that you would think they were competing with.
Okay.
Right? Because it's more like, hey, if we can grow this industry together, right, the more successful we'll both be. Whereas a lot of people with smaller mindsets would think, how much of this one single pie can I get? The other thing I learned a lot with Mr. Blake was, and he harped on this a lot, man. He said, man, when Home Depot was at its worst, I knew better days were coming. And when we were at our best, I knew worse days were coming.
So would you say they're optimists?
No, they're absolute realists.
Okay.
They're absolute realists. They have the courage to deal. Jim Collins talks about confronting the brutal facts.
Right.
They don't want to be exposed to what they want to hear. They can't stand it. Like, right. I'm not optimist and I'm not negative. Just give me the information and I'll help us win.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. Just give me the information I need and I'll help you win. That's their attitude. And the other thing is they truly, the best leaders. So Horst Schulze, the founder of Ritz-Carlton, Frank Blake. There's the executives at Chick-fil-A. I've never heard one of them. I don't know if this is a double negative. I have never heard one of them not talk about the fact that their entire job was to support their teams. We gloss over this, but we have to understand that these guys live in that reality. Like, they talk about how snow melts at the edges, right? And they're the ones that realize that our associates who talk to customers, churches, our volunteers who talk to guests, that's actually where things are happening. They're not happening in our boardroom. That's
right.
That's another thing I've learned from them. Like, if you're not capturing what's happening on the edges of your business, you're not learning.
Yeah, it's the transducer points. Back in my music business days, I would tell people the most important things in a signal chain. So basically, like how sound goes through a microphone, through a system, out a speaker, where acoustic energy turns to electric energy, a microphone, and where the opposite happens, a speaker. Electric energy turns back to acoustic energy. Those are the most important parts in the entire system. You can spend $1 million on everything in between, but if you don't get those transition points right, it doesn't matter.
That's so good.
You can use that on your next podcast.
I will use that. If I understood your acoustic language, I would use that.
Yeah, that's right. So, okay. I know you're a proud dad, so let me take some of the family stuff off of this. But of the businesses you've built, the churches you've worked with, what are you most proud of?
So we're taking the dad piece off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we know that's number one, 100%.
Yeah. And I'll take personal off too. So I think, man, I've had to think about this because, people do ask that sometimes. I would say my team.
Okay. I love that.
And here's why. I look at the team. I don't know that I have anyone who should be working for me, right? And some of the resumes and guys, but the guys who have come over and the ladies who have come over to be a part of our mission and vision could be doing anything they want. I mean, we're talking, we've pulled people from top corporate positions or whatever because they believe so much in the mission. And that's fun to have that team. But then on top of it, to see how they work so hard, they love each other. And there's just become this all these super talented people all wanting to go the same direction and accomplish the same thing. And I don't know how much of that I honestly don't know how much they get that from me. I think truly just been so blessed with having the right people come on board and they get it. And so I look at my team and I'm like, wow, if I accomplish nothing else for the church and for the business world, having these people alongside me is probably my biggest accomplishment.
That's so good. A question you said you're interested in answering was, if if you're talking to a younger Nathan, a Nathan right out of college or right out of high school, what advice are you giving him? What are you encouraging him with?
Oh, out of high school, stay out of jail. Just kidding, kind of. First piece of advice would be you belong. You're not an imposter. You belong in the room that you're in, not because of who you are, but because of whose you are.
That's good.
Right? That other people struggle just as much as you do with the same issues. Yeah. But I would say the advice I would give myself 8 years ago, okay? My favorite leadership book of all time is it's called Leadership on the Line by Ronald Heifetz. Okay. He is the professor of leadership at Harvard. He has this analogy about leadership, and he talks about the dance floor. So basically, if you think of yourself on a busy dance floor, right, and you're dancing, that's the doer, right?
Actually, this doesn't make any sense to me. I would never dance, but
well, let's just say that Ashley pulls you out onto the dance floor for a slow dance. Okay. And you don't have to move your feet, right? But picture this, right? When you're on the dance floor, automatically you accept the fact that you cannot see 50% of the room because they're behind you. Okay. Right? There's about 30 to 40% of the room that you maybe can see, but it's in your periphery. And if you're dancing with Ashley, you probably shouldn't be seeing because your focus is on her, but you really only see the 10% that's in front of you. Okay. So one of the key aspects, when you're starting off and you're being an entrepreneur, it's so easy to get caught up in the work of today and the tyranny of the urgent. I've got to get these things done. But you have to move to the balcony if you really want to see what's going on the dance floor. Because it's only on the balcony that I can see the entire room. Yeah. And I can see who's doing what and where and what's going on. I can't get a full picture of the room as long as I'm dancing on the dance floor. I can see 10% of the room, and it's the 10% I'm focused on. Yeah. So what I would say, that as an analogy, that's great. What I would say to myself 8 years ago is you spent way too much time working in your business. And I would allow myself to get so busy that I would stop working on myself, on my business, on my relationship with the Lord, right? Like what you need to focus on is the big picture. If it's impact, right? Mm-hmm. You're not worried about how well you're dancing. If it's impact, you're worried about how well the dance is going. Yeah. So good. You're seeing who's talking to who's in a corner by themselves, not talking. You're able to see the full picture. So I would say constant reminder is to pull yourself up far enough to where you can see what's really going on in your business, study your business, work on yourself, develop yourself.
Can you give us like a little more practical stuff? So those are really good, but like as an executive of your own company, are you pulling away for retreats? Are those on the calendar quarterly or on the calendar yearly? When are you trying to get to the balcony?
So yeah, I think the thing, so if we're being super practical, if you're trying to move from not starting a business to starting one, some of this has to do with corporate life cycles. So when you're just in upstart mode and everything is dependent on you, right? That's a different schedule because your first job is to bring enough revenue in to pay bills. That's right. Right. So but I think no matter what life cycle you're in, that your time is always your most precious commodity. That's the thing that you have to manage the most. So when I get up, it's easy for me to do 6 hours of emails if I wanted to. That's not. So here's a practical example. Go through your day, figure out all the things you do, then go back to the number you have in your head of what you need to make in order to leave the job you're in right now, right? Break that down by hour. Go through the list of things you do during the day and highlight how many of those things actually make you that $1 per hour. And whatever's not on that list, you find someone else to do.
That's good.
Right? The second thing is you have to be strategic, right? So everyone has goals, or that they should have goals. I don't know how much of that, lives with us. And so for me, if I set a goal in January, I forget it by February. So for me, it's, establishing what the goal is, but I have Sunday night, I sit down, I write down the 3 to 5 things I have to do this week. Okay. Right. Then I fill in everything else around it. And if I have a meeting or if I have this thing and it doesn't help me with the 3 to 5 things that I said I needed to accomplish, I just don't do them. I'm okay not doing good things so that I can focus on the things that actually produce greatness.
I love that. So some of our listeners have said, hey man, we love the conversations you're having. The leaders are great. the more practical stuff like you're talking about. What are their habits? What are their schedules? How do they set up their week so that they can succeed? Okay. And you talked about that with Sunday, but maybe go just one level deeper on that. And then anything from a health standpoint, or how do you consume content to grow your leadership and your curiosity about learning about leadership? What are some of those real practical things people can learn from as well?
I love that question. So yeah, and just I'll tell you this, there's a guy here in Franklin who taught me everything about that. It's Michael Hyatt, and he's got some great resources on it. But here's my schedule: is your mornings are the most protected and sacred times. Get up before your family wakes up, right? And then spend that time just centering your day. So for me, that's a devotional. It's spending time with the Lord. No, I don't do that because I have to. It's not a checklist item. I forget who I am if I don't spend time with Jesus.
That's good.
Okay. Then I've already established on Sunday night what my 3 to 5 objectives are. So now it's a question of, okay, here's what I have planned for the day. Here's the things I really want to get done for the day. And I write them down. It is always going to be a tension. You're always going to have emails. You're always going to have text messages. You're always going to have phone calls. You have to be willing to say no to some of that so that you can focus on the things that you said would make you successful, right? Here's a tip if you're just getting started with this: is try this. And then the next morning, don't just plan for your day. Look back at your list from the day before. See how well you did.
That's good. And evaluate
it. And here's the thing. Don't be hard on yourself, man. It's a new day, right? Again, we talked about this, but like you have to be okay with the idea that you're constantly failing. If you're not, if you're not failing, you're not learning.
That's right.
You're not growing. So get over the failure crap. Get over feeling sorry for yourself. Like, you're going to fail. It's actually a good thing. We look at it as a bad thing. It's a good thing. Doing it twice, maybe not.
Yep.
Right? But as long as you adapt and learn. So look at it, hey, what would I do differently today that I learned from yesterday? So I asked that question a lot. This became a huge habit for me. If you call me at 8:15 in the morning, that 8 to 9 o'clock period, that's with my kids, right? And so I don't care who you are.
You're not answering the phone.
I'm not answering the phone because I don't have my phone, and I don't have my Apple Watch on to tell me my phone's ringing.
That's good.
So those are practical things. The other is this. I would say I have very regularly scheduled personal growth times. Friday afternoons, every other week, I am sitting by the Chattahoochee River. I am reading, praying, writing, reflecting. Hey, what am I learning right now that I could be doing? What is God leading me towards right now? So Don Martin, my mentor, told me this years ago. Everyone's heard the expression that leaders are learners. He said, I'll break this down for you a little further, okay? He says there's 3 things that you constantly have to be studying in order to be successful. You constantly have to be studying people. There is not a business on this planet that does not involve people.
Great.
The more you understand people, you can operate at any capacity. You're constantly studying yourself and your business, but yourself. So that is a vulnerability to say, hey, there's some things I'm good at, and there's some things that I'm not good at. But you're constantly learning and growing, and you're making time to spend time with mentors, to spend time in focus groups, reading books, because you are always aware of the fact that you could be better, and that's okay, right? And the third is always study your industry. Because, and sometimes it's so easy. Success is actually one of your greatest enemies at some point.
Right.
Because you just think that you can only learn from yourself. Like, you build up this idea that, like, hey, if my team's reporting all these KPIs back to me and I'm studying this and I'm studying that, but you lose the thing that got you to where you are, which that you are solving a big problem in a marketplace.
Yeah.
Right. But if you lose sight of that marketplace, you lose your business. So you're constantly studying your industry and how it's adapting and how it's evolving and where people are changing and how behavior is changing, because you always want to be the person who's solving the problems in the marketplace.
Yeah. I love that. People want to be comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. We want to set up our life where we've got enough money in the bank where we're not stressed, and we've got relationships where we're not completely without community. We want to set things up that help us become comfortable. The problem is comfort is its own enemy, because when you get comfortable, you lose all your perspective, and you lose, like you talked about, looking at the industry, and you're like, okay, well, what brought me here is not going to keep me moving forward, So I love that. That's really great.
Well, Matt, I'll say this. I think if you learn anything about the story of Peter stepping out of the boat, I think the message of that, right? So the first story, the disciples are in a boat, they just meet Jesus, and a storm pops up. Had to have been a nasty storm, right? Because these guys are fishermen. They've seen storms.
Right.
So for them to freak out, and their first response is, hey, Jesus, if you are who you say you are, make us comfortable. So chapters later, right, they're in a similar situation. One guy stands up and says, hey, I've seen you calm the waves. I've seen you do your thing. If you are who you say you are, call me to you in the storm. Yeah. Here's what I would say. As Christians, we were not called into a level of comfort. If we're not hurting, it is our job to enter into the hurt of others.
That's so good.
So if you're feeling comfortable,
do something else.
Do something else.
That's right. I love that. Nathan, this has been so good. I mean, we probably could go on forever because you're like a well of really great anecdotes, really great stories, and things that I think are really helpful for our listeners. Maybe we come back and do a round 2 at some point. Anything else you'd want to say before we sign off?
Take a risk on yourself. That's it. And I mean a measured risk. I'm not asking you to blow your savings on a crazy whim, but like I would pray about it. I would seek counsel, but like, at the end of the day, the Lord has put something special in each of our hearts. Also, don't feel like there's anything that you can do for him. The reason he gives you these gifts and the reason that he gives you the opportunities and the reason that he gives you these visions for what could be, they are gifts to be enjoyed with him, not responsibilities to be done for him. And so if you realize that the reason you have this is just because God wants you to experience the life that he's calling you to with him, it takes a lot of pressure off the solution that you're trying to create. So just when you take a risk on yourself, understand that there's a very big God there who is there, who's going to guide you through that process. And I mean, he just takes all the fear off the table.
That's so good. Nathan, thanks for joining us on the No One Ever Told Me podcast.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for having me, Matt. This is awesome.
Yes, I love learning from leaders like Nathan. His enthusiasm and conviction fire me up. Here's a couple of my favorite moments. Number 1, don't make passive mistakes. It's better to fail moving forward towards your goals than to fail from never trying. Number 2, make time to get off the dance floor and into the balcony. You have to force yourself to get perspective on your organization or you'll never see the picture clearly. And this third one, he said, be a student. You've got to study people, you've got to study yourself, and you've got to study your industry. I hope you had some favorite takeaways as well. If you did, send me a note on our socials and take 1 minute to rate, share, and subscribe, and make sure you join us for our next No One Ever Told Me podcast.